She made maternity wear chic and built her name into a brand. I'm Chris Valerio, and you're watching Venture. Welcome to Venture, the world of small business and big ideas. We welcome Liz Lange, founder of Liz Lange Maternity, to the program.
When you used to think of maternity clothes, you didn't think of catwalks. Liz Lange set out to change that. In 1997, she borrowed $50,000 from her family and got to work making chic clothes for expecting fashionistas. It was a market most retailers had ignored. Lange proved there was huge opportunity there as orders poured in from around the world. She opened a flagship store on Madison Avenue in 2000. A year later, Nike approached Lange with a 5-year deal to create an activewear line. Her business grew as this celeb-obsessed culture went baby bump crazy.
Don't worry, Dave, it's not yours.
Next, Target came calling. They wanted to take her hip mama designs to the masses. Some warned that going down market would destroy her upmarket cachet. Instead, her business grew 20% for the first 3 years, and in 2007, she sold the company for a reported $50 million to Blue Star Alliance.
It's so cute.
Selling off just in time for the retail slowdown? Well, that's another bump that she could be proud of.
Thanks so much for joining us, Liz. So we got to start off talking about, where did you get this idea? I know you were a Vogue editor. You worked for a design firm. You had never been pregnant, correct? So where did the seed get planted?
I know, Chris, people always like to say, oh, well, she was pregnant, she couldn't find anything to wear, but actually that's not true. You got it right. You know, it was definitely that time in my life. I don't think I would have thought of the idea had I been 18 and pregnant women were saying they didn't have anything to wear, but I was 28 or 29. I was newly married. My friends were all getting pregnant. It was definitely on my mind, but I wasn't myself pregnant. And I noticed that, well, there were two things I noticed. The first was that I was working with this designer, and we were making non-maternity clothing. And my friends would come to our showroom to buy our dresses and our outfits, even when they were pregnant. And I'd say, what are you doing here? You're pregnant. Go to a maternity shop. And they would say, oh, no, you don't understand. There's nothing out there. So that was sort of, thought number one was that, gee, whatever is out there for pregnant women really isn't serving them well. It's not what they want to buy. And then the number two of sort of my thought process was that I would notice that when they did, in fact, squeeze themselves into one of our non-maternity designs, the fact that it was sort of fitted and a little bit small on them actually made them look thinner, sexier, and better. Now, it's hard to imagine today in 2009 that maternity clothing wasn't always fashionable and fitted, but actually back then, it was like the late 1990s.
Kind of sailor's collars?
It was, yes, it was sailor collars. It was little baby doll dresses. Everything was huge. And frankly, pregnant women, it's an evolution. They are big, let's say the night before they deliver, but it starts small and it grows. So it was like this aha moment of pregnancy clothing needs to be more fitted. And so it could grow with women, not just start out really big. And it also needs to be really fashionable. It needs to look like real fashion. And I couldn't get that idea out of my head.
And so you get the idea. You have these. What's the solution here? You decide to start your own company. Where do you get the money?
Right. No, it's not easy. It was crazy. I got the idea, but, I'd never considered myself an entrepreneur. I wasn't thinking about starting my own business. I went to the designer that I was actually working with. He was my partner. And I said, you know what? We've got to do maternity. We shouldn't just be doing regular clothing. We've got to do maternity. I'm positive. He had no interest in that, as nobody did at that time. In fact, I even went to a few retailers that I knew, and I said, I'm thinking about doing this maternity line that'd be really fashionable. Maybe it would be a little bit expensive, but it would be worth it. Mm-hmm. And they all said, oh, maternity is a terrible business. Don't even think about it. But again, I could not get it out of my mind. It kept me up at night. I kept thinking that if I didn't...
It kept you up at night?
It did. I kept thinking that if I didn't do this line of maternity clothing that I had in my head, and someone else did something like it later, that I just wouldn't be able to forgive myself. So I left this designer I was working with, and with really no capital. It wasn't like I didn't go out raising capital. with a little money that I had, a little money from my parents, a little money from my new husband.
50,000, right? That's what it started.
It added up to 50,000 at the end, but I didn't actually go to any one person and say, "Can I have 50,000?" There were just a few bills that needed to be paid, and it was somewhere, frankly, it sounds like a widespread between 25 and 50,000. But it started with, I ordered some fabric. I noticed across the street from where we lived that there was a for rent sign in this little office building. I rented a little space. It was in the back of the building. It was tiny. You know, it was just a little office. And my idea was that I didn't want to invest in actually making a lot of clothing and hoping that women would come buy it. I understood that the retailers had no interest in selling it in their stores. They had all told me that. Like, maternity's a bad business. Be prepared to sell it yourself. So I thought, fine. I'll sell it myself. I don't need a retailer to get in between me and my potential customer who I know will understand these clothes. So I...
Did you get out your sketchbook? I mean, did you have... I don't know how the industry works. Did you draw these things?
You know, crude sketches. I am not an artist, and I am not trained in design. I went to Brown University and majored in comparative literature. Like, I never thought of myself as somebody that would ever be a designer. I always loved fashion. I have to put that out there. I always loved fashion, and I think that I always, there are many, you know, everyone has their specific talents. I think taste was always one of mine, that I had good taste. I was the friend that other friends wanted to shop with. But beyond that, no. So in a notebook, I made some very crude sketches. I tore things out of magazines, not because I wanted to copy them, but because I liked one thing about them. Like, I liked the sleeve of this, but the neckline of that.
We're going to get more into this. We got to go to commercial break. But you heard it there. She tore from newspapers. Very little cash. We're with Liz Lange, founder of Liz Lange Maternity. You're watching Venture. Welcome back to Venture. We're with Liz Lange, the founder of Liz Lange Maternity. We were talking about, you got cutouts, newspapers, small little rental place. How did that become a line, the first line?
Well, I think the real key to my success at the beginning was that I thought about the fact that when women aren't pregnant, which is most of the time, specifically celebrities, every designer is vying to dress them, because if a celebrity wears something of yours, then it means big sales. So I thought, well, what's happening to these pregnant celebrities? Who's dressing them? We're not seeing them. Hard to believe today when we see them on the cover of every magazine pregnant. But so I reached out to some of the celebrities that I knew were pregnant at the time. I didn't know them personally, but I reached out to publicists or assistants. And I was able to dress a bunch of them at the beginning. The first big celebrity was Cindy Crawford. And frankly, that led to press on who I was and what I was doing. And the next thing I knew, my phone was ringing off the hook with women that also wanted to wear the dresses that Cindy wore.
So did you sew those first things? I mean, how did you pick out the materials?
You're right. I should back up. No, I pounded the pavements of 8th and 9th Avenue. I knew that's where all factories were. And I went to see a bunch of different factories, and I found one that was willing to do very small lots. That means, you know, not big quantities, and work with me on making both the first sample and then the production. And everything was made to order at the beginning. So I found a factory that was willing to make first a sample line and then was willing to take my faxed orders every night, which were really just one-offs. Like, so Mrs. So-and-so came in and she wants this dress in green. And it was very, 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 you know, mom and pop. And I would deliver dresses to these women that ordered them 2 weeks after they had ordered them.
How long did it take you to become profitable at that point?
You know, I became profitable almost right away, just because I hadn't invested a lot in the company, and I started to get a lot of press, and I had more clients than I knew what to do with. So maybe within the first...
So what did you do when you had more clients and you knew what to do with? I mean, how do you expand from there?
I didn't even know what to do. I didn't have a website. I didn't know what to do. The first thing I did was I slapped together a website. I mean, this was 1998. And so that women who didn't just live in New York City, where I was located, could also perhaps see my designs and speak to me on the phone and order them. And I'm
assuming a lot not out in L.A. if you were targeting the celebrity audience.
And you know, things started to move. Things started to grow. I realized, wow, I've kind of outgrown this. I actually could have a store. And my first store I opened on Madison Avenue in New York City, and that was followed by a store in Beverly Hills and a store in Long Island. And within the first 2 years of my business, actually, and it was a big shock to me, when I still had almost really nothing more than a showroom, Nike called. I didn't even know.
I wanted to talk about that. I'm so glad you brought this up. Corporate relationship, Nike calls wanting a maternity line.
Of all things. I mean, I almost fell off of my chair because, frankly, I barely had a storefront at that point, and Nike was so huge, I had no idea I could ever possibly be on their radar. And they basically said, we want to do maternity athletic apparel, and we've sort of identified you as the leader in that. And I was, you know, I still considered myself very small. I had like 5 employees at the time. And together we did a deal. What was your revenue at that point? And then how did your revenue change once you got like that corporate
Well, because we're private,
I barely ever say revenue.
Then a percentage maybe gain.
But that became a licensing deal. So, to be able to, we went from selling just in my one little office space in New York City to selling at every Nike town, Nike.com, and also Nike used to have these stores called Nike Goddess stores. They don't have them anymore, but we were also on the Nike Goddess store. So it increased my business. My business was growing almost 100% or more than that every single year. I couldn't, it was one of those like whirlwind entrepreneurial
So how did you keep up with it? I mean, did you start hiring a lot of people?
Yes. I mean, I started hiring more and more people every single day. Basically, we grew in the end to about 50 employees by the time, right before I sold the business. And I don't know, I mean, I look back on that time as the craziest, happiest time. We all worked about 20 hours a day, I think. I mean, honestly, like, I worked in the, I waited on tons of customers. The 5 or 6 women I hired also,
Did you still manufacture your clothes, or was Nike taking care of that?
Nike was doing Nike was doing the Liz Lange for Nike Athletic Apparel, but that was really just a small, that was just a partnership. Really, what we were really doing was not athletic apparel. Like, Nike was not manufacturing the dresses and the suitings and the jeans and the T-shirts that we were doing.
And were you still manufacturing at 8th and 9th Avenue? I mean, did you still have
frankly, I was. I stayed with that factory actually for the first 6 years of my business. We're only 11 years old. So of course, at the beginning, I mentioned that we were doing things just one-off, just one at a time, made to order. That changed, and we were doing, sometimes we were making 1,000 or 2,000 of one style. Everyone kind of grew with me. It was a very sort of happy entrepreneurial story where, people were able to do that.
And then Target. Yeah. Then Target came in, and this is a big one, correct?
That was really what changed everything. I have to say, the Nike thing was fabulous, and that probably led the way to the Target thing, and the Nike thing was extremely prestigious. But when I was able to work out a deal with Target whereby we would do a Liz Lange for Target line, which was a less expensive version of what we were doing on the high end, and we started out by being in every Target location as half of their maternity department, and then they had their own label that was a Target private label, was the other half of their maternity department, and also the same thing on Target.com. But soon we were doing so phenomenally well that they gave us the entire maternity department. It's quite a mouthful.
And this was in 6 years.
Yes, that deal started, I believe it was 2002 when we rolled out to all of their stores.
So you heard it. We're watching Liz Lange. She founded Liz Lange Maternity, and in about 6 to 7 years, she went from a small, tiny office to being in lots of Target offices. You're watching Venture. We'll have more. This is Venture, and I'm Chris Valerio. We're joined with Liz Lange, the founder of Liz Lange Maternity, and we were just talking about how you just found this partnership with Target. We're going to be half of their maternity line in all their stores. I mean, that had to have been huge. You became from a small boutique to suddenly this household name.
That changed everything. We were just, we were catering to a very wealthy clientele in Beverly Hills and New York City and a lot of celebrities, and all of a sudden we were dressing every woman in America, basically, in every single Target location.
Did that
very
concern you at all, from going from this kind of high profile to affordable clothing, a discount retailer?
I think that must be the entrepreneur in me. So many people advised me against it, but I never even understood their concerns. To me, I think it's all about the high-low mix. I think sometimes it's a different customer, sometimes it's the same customer. I just felt like that was not giving women enough credit. That, like, I didn't understand why, there couldn't be Liz Lange at Target and Liz Lange at Nordstrom, and it's different. It's different.
Now, did Target approach you, or did you reach out to Target?
I reached out to Target, actually, but it was very mutual, because now looking back on it, it all happened very quickly. Like, from the day I reached out to them, they said, "This sounds great. Fly to Minneapolis. Let's talk about this." I think we hammered out a deal within like 6 months.
And how do those deals work? I mean, do you get the percentage? Is there
a classic licensing deal, yes, whereby Target licensed the rights to use our name and to manufacture clothing with our name, and they sell it, they manufacture it, and they distribute it to their Target locations, and then we get a percentage of those sales. And they also market it. So the marketing was great too. They really put so much money into turning us into a household brand.
Now, what year was this again?
This was 2002 it started.
Okay, now, I know that 5 years into your business, so maybe around that same time, but you were actually diagnosed with cervical cancer. How did that play into, not only obviously dealing with cancer and being an entrepreneur, running your own business, and having a family, but also you run a maternity line? Yes,
I mean, the irony definitely wasn't lost on me that here I am, the face of maternity clothing, and I am, facing, a disease that prevents me from being able to have children. Although I did it, but very, very luckily, I'd already had a boy and a girl who are now 10 and 8 when I was diagnosed in 2001 with cervical cancer. It was a very, very scary time, and then from a business point of view, I was in the midst of launching the Nike line and just beginning to negotiate the Target line. As a matter of fact, when Target first wanted me to come to Minneapolis, as I mentioned, to talk business, I couldn't because I was doing radiation every day and I couldn't leave, but I didn't want to tell them that. So it was a very, very difficult time. And today, you know, it's a real mission of mine.
Specifically with that, because you got the Target deal.
Yeah, I ended up putting it off a little bit, like maybe a month, and saying I was just tied up in New York. They must have thought that was crazy. Who doesn't want to fly to Minneapolis? And that might have even helped. I might have seemed very, you know, not eager. Quite a cool customer. And there was a break in my radiation treatments, a 1-week break, and I actually I round-tripped it to Target in one day to Minneapolis, where their headquarters are, and we negotiated on that day. But today I'm a big advocate for screening for cervical cancer, and I've even created this website called allaboutcervicalcancer.org, which has a lot of information about it.
Now, you did all this, created this huge company, and then you sold your majority stake. Where did that decision come from? And I believe the number, and you're probably not going to give me, but the number that we have here, $50 million, I think is what it was sold at.
I know it was reported that way.
Yes.
You know, I wasn't necessarily thinking about selling, but offers started to come in a year ago fall. It was the fall of 2007. That were attractive, and I had worked at this for so long. I love it. I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge passion. The stores were my babies, and the business is my third child, definitely. But it was the right offer at the right time, and I guess I felt that it was time to monetize the success that I had been having.
How many employees did you have at that point?
I had 50 employees. We had 3 stores.
What kind of revenues were you had come in?
You know, again, we never talk revenues, but, you know, we had a huge wholesale business. We had 3 flagship boutiques, and then we had the entire maternity department at every Target location. So it was a very good time in the company. It was, looking back on it, it was a phenomenal time in the economy. So I can't...
The timing was good.
The timing was good.
We're talking to Liz Lange. She is the founder of Liz Lange Maternity, talking about how she went from $50,000 to a multi-million-dollar company. You're watching Venture. We'll be back. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We're with Liz Lange, the founder of Liz Lange Maternity. We were just talking about how you sold your majority stake in the company that you founded not too long after you founded it. We're talking about specifically why you decided to do it. Tell me a little bit more about why you decided to do it.
Well, it was really, I guess it could be summed up as the right offer at the right time.
So what happens when you sell your name? I mean, that is essentially, you're selling your name. What is that ownership rights does that give you going forward? What does that mean for you going forward with Liz Lange?
I mean, that's definitely, you know, it's a strange thing. It's hard to sell your name. On the other hand, I sold it to great partners who I do feel are my partners. And I think we're, you know, we are aligned on what we want to do with the brand, and I'm very lucky. And I am involved with them. I'm still, you know, the creative director and the face of the brand, so I still make a lot of decisions, but I certainly don't make them solely anymore the way that I used to.
So are you still involved with the day-to-day processes of marketing the line and of what is next for the line?
I'm still involved in all that. Again, like, I don't run it anymore. I'm not the president, which some of that I loved having. I love giving some of that up. Like, as an entrepreneur, I never dreamed that I would have to manage employees. I only thought about the idea. So now I'm a little bit back to some of the stuff I really like the most, which is, you know, marketing the brand and working on design.
Well, I'm sure that marketing the brand at this point is kind of, it's a tough retail environment. That's the bottom line. We had a Target coming out, fourth quarter profit fell 41%. They're having to sell items at discounted. They're cutting the number of new store openings. How does something like that affect design labels, for instance, as the one you have?
This is a very, very tough time for, as everyone knows, for retailers, for designers. There's no doubt they're becoming fewer and fewer channels where you can sell your clothing. Retailers want major markdown dollars. It's a very tough time. I mean, again,
how do you keep the competitive advantage then?
I think it's about sharp price points. I really do. I think that today the customer is just not willing to pay overinflated price points. I know you're mentioning issues at Target, but I think Target actually kind of has it right with their price points. So I think, you know, they're one of the retailers that will end up fine.
What do you think are some of the trends in maternity wear at this point?
Well, definitely the trends that I started 11 years ago are definitely there today. Maternity clothing needs to be extremely fashionable. You see pregnant celebrities everywhere, and every woman wants to look and dress like them. So it's about keeping it really sexy, but appropriate, and wearing clothing that really celebrates this fabulous time in your life and that looks just like any fashion you might
Now,
want to wear.
going forward here, you've relaunched your high-end line just a few weeks ago, I believe.
I did. We're really excited about that. We've relaunched
also on
the high-end.
Nordstrom.com?
It is at Nordstrom.com, yes, and we're very excited about that. I'm working on a new book that's all about, it's a follow-up to my other book. This book is all about life post-baby, how to look fabulous after a baby's born and feel fabulous. I'm working on some non-maternity clothing items for a show for HSN. We're working on a baby layette line that's going to debut this summer, and we're just debuting our convertible Liz Lange diaper bags.
So still growing.
Still growing.
Liz Lange still growing as the pregnant women continue to grow.
Exactly.
I heard you like to read. What are you reading right now?
Oh, gosh, I'm reading a book. What is it called? It's sitting on my night table. I can't remember what I'm reading. Now, I think it's called Disbelief, but it might be called The Believers. But my favorite book lately is American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld. Couldn't put it down.
Excellent. Well, you certainly have been dressing American wives for quite some time here. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. This is Liz Lange. She founded Liz Lange Maternity, took it from a $50,000 company, sold it for millions. Thanks for joining us. Watch Venture next week.